Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. What's going on today? What are we getting into?
Well, when was the last time you heard of a good old prison break? Has it been a minute?
It's been a minute.
Okay. Well, wait until you hear about this one. So let's get into it. This is Season 6, Episode 25, Dale Reming. Where you have prisons, you have prisoners. Where you have prisoners, you have people who are determined not to stay. And with this episode, let's take a look at one of the boldest prison breaks in Michigan history. And this is a story that was researched and written by Rebecca Heyer, so thank you, Rebecca. Dale Reming wasn't a man who murdered. He wasn't violent. He wasn't a man who would become well known for his long list of petty crimes, referred to in the papers of the time as, quote, an all-American scoundrel. He was personable and came across as sincere. So it is easy for him to play his cons. Even after his arrest, he was called, quote, friendly, smart, helpful, kind. Not a person he came in contact with had a bad word to say about him, even his victims. Well, except for James Mangan. He was, however, a man that would become well known for one of the most brazen Michigan prison breaks of all times. Born July 4th, 1928 in Hooker, Oklahoma. I'm sorry, that tickled me. Hooker? Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
That's where they all come from.
Oh, God. Okay. So Dale Reming was the youngest of 7 children and children of Otto and Alice Reming. His father, Otto, worked as a drayman, a beer delivery driver. His mother, Alice, kept house. The 7 children kept the house lively, but Dale stood out among his family. Known as a charismatic individual with a smooth tongue, even at a young age, he also had a musical and athletic ability. His charisma and athleticism would serve him well in the life of crime he would choose to live. By 1946, Otto and Alice had moved to Bakersfield, California, with Dale and his first wife, Etta, and their young son, Gregory. The 5 of them lived together in a house on Beardsley Street, and it's here he was first arrested. At the age of 15, Dale had dropped out of school and obtained a job on a ranch. He was arrested at age 18 for the first time for stealing a saddle from the ranch. He would claim in interviews later that his sister was married to a country star, Buck Owens, and he went on tour with the country star, Tex Ritter. While touring with Ritter at age 18, he got married and started riding bulls. It was after he was injured with bull riding that he claimed he turned to his life of crime. However, none of Buck's 3 wives share a name with any of his sisters, so who knows if the story is true or another con. According to Find a Grave, he also worked as a stuntman in Hollywood for a while, so maybe there is some truth to his claim. In 1951, while working as a bellhop, he found a wallet of another bellhop named James Jimmy Mangan. He quickly adopted this as his alter identity. Dale would purchase items using bogus checks in Jimmy's name, then turn around and sell the items for cash. He would even be dishonorably discharged from the Navy using James's name. Arrested for the crimes in 1954, he was sent to Soledad Prison, south of San Francisco, to serve his sentence of 1 to 14 years. Deciding prison life wasn't for him, he staged his first unsuccessful escape. He simply walked away from his work at the prison dairy farm. He only managed to be on the run for 3 days before he was recaptured at a farmhouse and sent back to finish out his original sentence with time added on. He was released in 1962. In 1971, bored with bogus checks, he decided he would up his game and he stole an airplane. Once again, he was captured, charged with grand larceny, and sentenced to serve his time in Soledad. Still, of the mindset that prison was not the place for him and learning from past mistakes, he escaped once again, and this time moved to Michigan, leaving his wife, child, and parents behind. Knowing his escape would have everyone looking for him, he changed his name back to James Mangan. He settled in the small town of Sydney near Greenville in Montcalm County in 1972, posing as a broke cattleman. His familiarity with horses and his ability as a blacksmith lent credence to his story. He also had a photo album containing pictures of his son that died in a car crash and his wife died after 6 months in an iron lung, and thus was the reason for his poverty. Medical bills for the two had taken all his money. It was a story guaranteed to garner sympathy. Shortly after his move to Sydney, he met Kay Peterson, a teacher at Portland schools and daughter of the town's wealthiest businessman. Kay was in her 20s. Dale was 44. Under the name of James Mangan, Dale married Kay. Now, there is no record of a divorce from his first wife, Etta. Just want to throw that out there. Shortly after Dale took Kay on a trip to Colorado and showed her a ranch he said he owned, quote, "He was a very nice fellow and everybody loved him." His father-in-law later said, quote, "Even the littlest child loved him." But soon, he was back to his old ways. He borrowed some money from friends, telling them that he had money coming from the sale of a cattle ranch in Colorado. He told people the money was tied up in escrow, and as soon as it cleared, he would pay them back. But instead, he took the money and went to Vegas. Why not? Planning on winning the money back and more. But he didn't win. He lost big. It wasn't long before all the lies began to catch up with him. Well, as they always do, right? Kay had purchased a truck from Portland Motor Sales just before the two had married. Dale went into the dealership after they married and bought a camper top for the truck, paying by check. The camper top was installed for a total of $2,440, and Dale left with the updated truck. At the time, he also put a $500 deposit on a truck for himself, also by check. But both checks bounced, and Kay hadn't seen him in days. The dealership called the police, who eventually found the camper top parked in a front yard in Indiana with a for sale sign on it. The dealership pressed charges for the bad checks, and others did also. His total in bad checks was over $35,000, and that would be $252,093 in today's money. Oh, that's a lot of cash. His father-in-law, chairman of the board of the town's bank, had covered bounce checks for him in the past, but this time, he wouldn't do it. After writing the bad checks in Portland, Dale and a buddy, Dennis Grabat, traveled to Hooper, Nebraska. There, they held up a hog farm of the Snover family at gunpoint. They had loaded close to 400 hogs onto a truck, leaving the family and their workers tied up. Traveling to Iowa, the pair planned to sell the hogs. The value of the hogs, had they been legally owned, would have been over $70,000, which would be $494,302 in today's money. However, because they didn't have the health paperwork, they couldn't sell them for even close to that amount. Disappointed in his venture, he returned to Michigan and went back to writing bad checks and selling the items he bought for cash. In 1973, his identity was discovered in Ionia County, and he was sentenced to serve 7 to 10 years of hard labor at Jackson State Prison for the hog theft and bad checks. Jackson Prison was one of the largest prisons in the world at one time. Called a city within a city, the prison had its own factories and shops the prisoners worked in, and at one point, women could buy wedding dresses at the prison shop the inmates had sewn. Oh, well, that's interesting. Making wedding dresses.
Well, that's crazy. This is a men's prison making wedding dresses?
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, like I can imagine making pants and stuff like that, but wedding dresses, that one caught me off guard. The prison complex was surrounded by thick brick walls, almost 34 feet high. But once again, Dale was firm in his belief that he did not belong there, and he knew there was a way out. He just didn't quite know how to do it. But then he met Gertrude Woodbury. Now, Gertrude was a 43-year-old divorcee from Weberville. She was visiting a relative in Jackson Prison when the two met. The two began talking, and soon she started to visit him also. Somehow, Dale managed to convince her that he belonged on the outside. The promise of a share of $60,000 he told her he had hidden didn't hurt either. She would involve her 20-year-old son, Calvin, Jolyn Kahn, age 32 from Hazlitt, Donald Hill, 23 from Fowlerville, Morris Koloski, 21 of Weberville, Joanne Van Patten, 22 from Oak Grove, and Susan Hill, 20 of Oak Grove, in the plans to free Dale.
Okay, I'm just going to say, there's way too many people involved for them not to all get busted.
I know. Yeah, that's a lot. You got to keep that shit down low and involve one person.
There's too many peeps. Too many peeps.
Yeah, but you're gonna see why all of those people were very important and why he needed so many. So Dale knew none of them except for Gertrude at the time of his escape. On June 6th, 1975, at 10:15 in the morning, prison guards stood in stunned amazement as a helicopter landed inside the prison walls. They watched as Dale ran from between two buildings, jumped into the helicopter, and flew off into the early morning sky. Less than 20 seconds had passed. Some reports say as few as 9. The pilot had less than 4 feet of clearance for the rotors on all sides. It takes a big sack. If the pilot had made one error, it would have turned fatal in an instant. But somehow, he hadn't. Morris had chartered a helicopter earlier in the day. Once in the air, he held a knife to pilot Richard Jackson's neck and informed him of the plan to land at the prison yard. While Morris had been hijacking the helicopter, Dave had dropped a red handkerchief on the prison ground and then hidden himself. It was to this red mark the pilot had been directed to land. Once Dale was on board, the pilot was instructed to fly north. When they reached the intersection of M106 and Meridian Road near Leslie, he was instructed to land. Spraying Richard with mace, the two men ran toward 3 getaway cars, the driver of which were Jolyn, Joanne, and Susan. The 3 cars sped off in different directions. Although, all I can think of is dun, 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 dun. That's all I can see in my brain.
Possible.
Mission Impossible. That's
You can read this story without having sound effects in your head. Dun, 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 dun.
I know, my God.
Well, maybe this is where some of those people that wrote those movies got their inspiration.
Yeah, they did a little Michigan research and like, this cat, he's cool. Although he was maced, Richard managed to get the copter airborne again and radio the locations of the escape vehicles to the police. Dale, however, missed his ride in the confusion and spent the night wandering the woods fighting mosquitoes. The next day, he wandered into the town of Leslie. There, he called a friend he had known in prison who was out on parole and told him to pick him up. Instead, the friend, not wanting to jeopardize his parole, called the Novi Police Department, who in turn called the Michigan State Police. Michigan State Trooper William Flowers was driving an unmarked car through Leslie, looking for Dale, and spotted him in a grocery store. He watched as Dale walked into the town's bar. Parking the car, he walked over to the bar, entered, and arrested Dale. Dale gave up without a fight. While waiting for backup, the two talked about horses. Dale would also tell Flowers, quote, "Cages are for somebody besides people. Cages are what cause recidivism. It isn't that the guy is necessarily a bad guy. It's that the prison system breeds it into us." He was eventually charged and convicted of air piracy and kidnapping. He served his time at the federal penitentiary in Marion, Illinois. Going back to school while incarcerated, he completed his high school and learned drafting and carpentry. Kay had their marriage annulled shortly after his arrest. Gertrude was arrested 11 days later along with Morris, working at a carnival in Kansas. She was sentenced to 20 years for kidnapping. Morris was sentenced to 20 years for air piracy and kidnapping, but was released in 1981. Calvin was charged with knowing about the plan but not informing the police, so he received 2 years probation for that. Jolyn was charged with aiding and abetting a kidnapping and received 4 years. Joanne and Susan were charged with federal air piracy and given less than 6 years. Dale was released in 1982, and he moved back to Michigan, where he rented 75 acres of land in Mecosta, Michigan. Interviewed in 1984, he told a reporter, quote, "I did my 2, and then I flew." He later moved back to California and died in 1999, just 2 days before his 71st birthday. Although the movie Breakout, a prison escape via helicopter, had come out earlier in the year of 1975, Dale swore that he hadn't seen the movie. This was the first attempt at a prison break in Michigan using a helicopter, and so far, the only successful one. I freaking love this guy.
That's crazy that all these people got involved and they did time when they didn't even know him.
I know. But I guess it was the promise of 60 grand split, but that's a lot of people. So what, you're only getting a couple grand a piece, but...
Yeah, that's not worth it.
No, but they were like, hell yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, that was a gaggle of idiots is what that was.
Oh my God. I know, it's funny because when Rebecca was doing, when she was telling me she was researching, she kept calling him the helicopter guy. Oh my God, I love it. So if you enjoyed this story and would like to hear more, please hit that like and share button. Let us know in the comments what you think about the escape. As always, we appreciate you listening. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great week, and we will see you back on Wednesday for Round Robin. So have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.